This is my video about critical thinking. The very first thing I want you to consider is how do we as teachers get students to transition from partial or biased, maybe even shoddy thinking to skillful and thoughtful thinkers. And I think one way to help aid in this transition is to consider the habits of mind. There are 16 habits of mind, and I've picked 8 that I try to work on a little bit in my own classroom. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about those 8. The first one is questioning and posing problems. And so as a teacher, it is important for us to help them understand how to work through the critical thinking process. And I think we can help them do this by the questions that we ask. And so this is kind of where the Bloom's taxonomy would play in. And most everybody knows about Bloom's taxonomy. We start with our knowledge and comprehension level questions, and we move into application and analysis and really get them thinking about how they are going to apply and analyze what they're doing and how they're solving problems. And then the final steps would be synthesis and evaluation. It's important that we ask questions of all those different levels to encourage their minds to think that way. As a critical thinker, you need to consider different types of questions, asking the who, what, when, where, and whys of the problems, looking at different viewpoints, how things are related, and just different questions in general. The second is thinking interdependently. Humans have strength in numbers, both physically and intellectually, and I think it's important, especially in the middle school, to teach the students that one person doesn't always have the answers. And so lots of people can contribute to answering questions, especially if we work together. In my classroom, I use lots of different Kagan activities. And so one that I like to use to help the students think interdependently is the think, pair, share, where a question is posed, they think about it independently, then they pair up, and they share their answer. And then together they come up with the best answer. And one thing that's important for this is the students to be open to feedback, which I know is tough, especially when the students don't like to be wrong. So that willingness and openness to feedback is important. The next is to think flexibly. Sometimes it's really easy for students to think in one direction, that this is how it needs to be done. However, it's important to teach them that as they get new or additional information, to kind of change how they want to solve a problem. They need to be able to know that there's alternative ways to solve problems. Apply past knowledge to new situations, This is important for students so they can kind of link what they already know to what they're learning to help them understand a little bit better how they want to work through a problem. And this quote was included in the text that I was reading. I've never made a mistake. I've only learned from experience. And I think this is really important, especially for younger students, to know that it's okay to make mistakes. It's all right. We'll move past the mistake and we'll learn how to do it the right way. And so I try to encourage that in my classroom. Metacognition, or thinking about their thinking. It's really important for the students to come up with an idea of how they'd like to solve the problem. Think about a plan in order to solve that problem and stick with that plan. And then as soon as they find out, well, maybe this didn't work, by reflection, that they can go back and say, okay, let me try something differently, and that they're able to think about how they want to work through the problem. Thinking and communicating with clarity and precision. This is important, that the students are very clear about how they'd like to communicate with their classmates. It's important that I tell my students you have to be very specific. You need to make sure that you use precise language, that you use terms that we use in class, labels, analogies, that sort of thing. Because if they're too vague, then the communication between them and a partner, or their communication between myself and the student, may be blurred. Creating, imagining, and innovating. This is important for the students. because it's important for them to take risks and frequently push boundaries of perceived self-limits. So for me, it's important to say, okay, you've done this before, but can we take it a step further? And for them to find that confidence in themselves in order to continue their learning. And the final one is to remain open to continuous learning. I think it's important that the students learn at a young age, that it's not going to be something that they learn and then they're done, because they will continue learning their entire life. I want them to be confident when they leave my classroom and say, okay, I know I can do this. Have I failed before? Absolutely. But did I get past it? You betcha. So keep learning, keep moving forward, finding that confidence. So again, there are 16 habits of mind. That was a real quick overview of 8 of them. I found my information on the sources listed below, and I will continue working on these habits of mind to implement critical thinking in my classroom.